Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to round four. So my name is Timbani and I'm going to be the chair of this round. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi guys, my name is Chantal. I'll be a panelist for this round. All the best.
Hi guys, Nyabuto Nyachi is my name, and I wish you guys all the best.
Yeah. So just general rules and general housekeeping. Firstly, your speeches are supposed to be 7 minutes, 15 seconds long. Anything beyond that will not be considered by the judges, so please try to stick to time. You are allowed to time yourself, but you are not allowed to be using a device while you're sitting there. But over there to time yourself, that is totally fine. Other than that, to the motion, this House prefers a cashless world. This House calls upon the Prime Minister to begin the debate. Yeah. Anytime this year, Prime Minister.
And we start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, it is important for us to understand that money has no value in and of itself. We like money because we can be able to purchase things with it. And largely, the concept of the value of money is inherent in and of itself to these people, and we as citizens, as people, as users and consumers of this money, determine the value we provide onto it. First thing here is an understanding what exactly a cashless world looks like. We must understand here that first and foremost, government does not advocate, or specifically opening government does not advocate for a world where there's no use of physical money. I think that's a very important distinction here that we must be able to understand so that we're able to progress swiftly. What we say here is we understand that there could be the use of finances that are physical in nature, but we prefer a world where this cashless world where these cashless transactions largely dominate the financial system and the financial markets. What exactly is this, right? This looks like the use of digital currencies. And secondly, use of transactions through things like banks, bank cards, Visa, debit cards, and these types of non-physical touch payment type of transactions, right? Now, this debate in and of itself is about a comparative analysis, right? We're looking at a world where we have cashless transactions vis-a-vis a world where there are these cash transactions, and provide a metric of this preference, right? So that in essence of trying to analyze it on different frameworks, what are the economic benefits of having these transactions? Because largely, a lot of these things, this motion in and of itself is an economic one in nature. Now, characterization here, some elements of this so that we may be able to understand what exactly we're dealing with. Now, we're looking at digital transactions against physical payment transactions. Here we're looking at digital currencies. The digital currencies in and of themselves are digital dollars, digital cedis, digital euros, right? Secondly, a system actually exists for management of these kinds of finances, meaning anything that the opposition tries to pull here and tell us that such a system does not exist and we're arguing in almost limbo is false. Mobile payment systems exist in Kenya, where the proliferation of M-Pesa exists and actually has the best mobile money system in Africa. MTN money also exists, and telecommunication networks largely provide for mobile money systems which facilitate these kinds of transactions. Thirdly, on characterization here and framing, right? Currencies are generally hinged on the gold standard. Again, preemptively locking out any argumentation here from opposition, claiming loss of value of currency, loss of value of money through the introduction of systems is locked out as well, right? Because these are still the same currencies. We've just transferred the form. Panel, we've transferred the form. Fourthly, on characterization as well, we have this kind of usage in both sides of the divide, right? Meaning we're able to target different actors across board, and I'll mention these actors shortly. It's possible to use these transaction systems both in the advanced world and the developing world, right? Citizens from those who seek to exploit them and seek to steal from them these finances, right? You'll understand why we look at arguments for cryptocurrency, or rather why we don't advocate for cryptocurrency, even if this is a cashless model in this mechanism, right? I'll take you. Thirdly, in terms of actors, right, we have financial institutions, right? Financial institutions are important here because they gain more consumers, and then they're also actually the middlemen in these financial transactions between both the citizens themselves, which allows for growth and sustainable development of the economy, right? Also here, they're the ones who facilitate this ease, they're the ones who have this kind of ease of registration, facilitate these kinds of transactions in line with banks, right? Now, I'll take that from the closing position.
So I don't understand your debate as a whole, because when you bring in the issue of mobile money, we think it is still pegged to physical cash. And you have to input it, and you also have to believe that you have that physical cash in area. You think we are talking about things like EC, where electronically the government is able to bring about certain kind of money.
Right. Again, this is answer to that question would put me in the domain of policy, but I'd actually have to explain exactly how this would work. Advantages that are present, harms and benefits that are present with a cashless world and a cash proliferated world, right? The mechanism here of how exactly this would work and that inputting of these finances largely falls, and I think the deputy will handle this. What are some of the benefits that we have here? One, convenience, right? Convenience allows for these transactions to be made at the convenience of one's home, and this kind of promotes spending, which is important for both producers and consumers, which improves and impacts economic growth. Secondly, tracking of transactions here. This improves security of finances in these financial institutions, because finding people is easier who are linked to terrorist activities, money laundering, because we now have a digital footprint vis-a-vis a cash proliferated world, right, where we cannot be able to trace these funds because we only have mechanisms such as fingerprints that exist, right? Thirdly, and most importantly here, we can be able to avoid forgery. This touches on this cryptocurrency element here that we're trying to lock out, right? It's possible to forge some of these currencies, and people have largely been swindled out of these things. But here, what we're trying to prevent is hemorrhaging of finances, which leads to devaluation and overall stagnation in the economy with these kinds of elements here. Panel, we must understand that this cashless world here is aimed at making financial transactions between consumers and producers easier, right? We're trying to increase the convenience here. We're trying to allow this. The simplest intuition pump is the COVID-19 world here. Panel, where we have these kinds of transactions, it's impossible to be able to make these things, because of that kind of communicable touch. Panel, never been prouder to propose.
Thanks, Prime Minister, for that wonderful speech. And the House calls upon the Leader of Opposition to begin Ops case.
and just taking out some things preemptively from any other gov speaker and closing. So no team can say that one side is more convenient or less problematic than the other because of modernity, less diseases, and more technology, because we think these things mutually happen on both sides of the debate. So you could easily still steal from people by hacking into their accounts if it's cashless, just as much as you could print fake money. We don't think it is exclusive to any side, and that cannot be a tipping point within today's debate. But then secondly, notice how just as much as convenience of carrying fiscal cash affects you on a daily basis, not having internet connectivity, not having the appropriate devices would still affect your transactions in a cashless world. We don't think any debate on that side can be the winning debate within today's debate. We think that is the most important thing to take out. But then we argue for a world that has both or cash, not a soft stance panel note, because as a prefers motion that has no say, we prefer X to Y, we have to justify the status quo versus the reimagined world. But even there's a harsh stance, we still think we win the debate from both sides. Reasons why OG is out of today's debate, because they still defend the status quo either way, where both casually exist, and some people prefer some more than the other. We don't think that is where the debate from gov side can happen. Defend a cashless world where you cannot carry fiscal cash, where you cannot use fiscal transactions within your realistic surroundings. But then notice, panel, here's where Obo's argumentation begins, that first and foremost, money is a form of expression. And stay with me on this. Why is this true? It's because when we agree to things, we do that by pushing our money into them. For example, not only a form of expression, that's what we are saying as the only form of expression. For this debate, however, that's the most important one under discussion. The reason why you would buy, say, a hair product or an facial product over the other is because you agree with the kind of cost or quality based on that. That is your form of expression of agreeing with something or the other. But then let's take it to a more realistic level. On social movements, on political parties, you send funding to them because they agree with your ideology. They are the kind of stances you believe that should be pushed within status quo. They have the direction that you think society needs to progress to within status quo. We think that money then becomes the central form of expression when it comes to such instances within status quo. But we think what then happens is that you then get these funds and support to push these movements to express your form and express your interest within these debates. Before I continue,
right, are you aware that cash refers to coins and physical money, whereas money is actually that transfer of value? Meaning whatever you're talking
so
about.
I'm not sure why that is relevant in today's debate. Come and defend you having an electronic system and not a cash, a fiscal one. That's basically the point. But then, panel, what does a cashless system really look like? Is that you have no fiscal money at all, electronically based completely, no printouts, no coins or whatever they are talking about, which means OG's Prime Minister's speech does not engage with what the debate is really about in the first place. But then notice that most importantly, what then happens is that an electronic system would then have to be integrated into states, which means whatever form being decentralized or not will have to be centralized into the entire world system. So World Bank, central banks would have to then stop printing money, but then use public ledgers to keep track of every single transaction that happens within status quo. Every single transaction is happening online, even if it is CG, CSG or whatever. Every single transaction, be it mobile money, as long as there's no fiscal money attached to it, is what would happen within status quo. What is the link then, and why does OO win today's debate? Is that in a cashless world then, where everything must be cashless or electronic and go through a public ledger which is run by the government and based on the government's instructions and technology, what happens is that there's a huge possibility for the government to stop free speech and speech of through the speech of money and forms, which is the form of expression that we talk about in today's debate. Classic examples, the truckers in Canada, where PayPal had to freeze the accounts of these truckers, which they thought were leading the movement against the state, to then cause a complete misfunction in the entire movement operation. For example, NSAS in Nigeria, where PayPal and Strathmore had to freeze the accounts again of the people that were leading these protests because they were defending their lives. We think that they cannot argue that the government don't have an incentive because one, the examples already prove that incentive that exists within status quo. But then secondly, generally, most governments are likely to be draconian, not that every government is, but at a point where that form of expression is then at the detriment or at the absolute control of the government, at which every point in time they can cut it off, they can cut it down. We think that's a very problematic world. Even if it will not happen, we think the possibility of it happening in itself is detrimental, and we cannot have it within status quo. What then becomes the impact that are largely more important than anything we get in today's debate is that, one, I said, you give the government the opportunity to put the final blow in these movements that exist within status quo. Notice how money is essentially at the heart of most forms of movements and expressions within status quo. The reasons why, when there's George Floyd died in the US, we didn't all fly to the US to go and support the Black Lives Matter movement, but we saw people setting up, go GoFundMe accounts because money becomes essential to the running of these movements. Notice how the speech needs amplification. The amplification needs resources, which is usually backed by money. People that run these movements need the sustenance. They are sacrificing going to their jobs for a week to engage in protest. They need to survive. At the core of this argumentation then shows you how central that money is. In a world where you go with OG's world and ensure that it's a completely cashless system, what you then do is hand over every single alternative that they could have succeeded in funding themselves, be it having like fiscal cash withdrawals that they may have had at any point in time, which would then be accepted at any point in time, is that you don't have it at all. You can't make transactions because you're linked with the Black Lives Matter movement, you're linked with the Chakras in Canada, and you're linked with the NSAS movement. I think these are likely very problematic things that we cannot happen, like allow to happen within status quo. Because at every point in time, these minorities need to be able to speak out for themselves. In a world where they're speaking out, then threatened, because like a large majority of people that control the entire state or control the entire political atmosphere do not agree with that ideology, I think it's the most problematic thing. But then the second thing again, it's just that we cannot have a cashless system, especially when we do not have the ability to run it and sustain it within status quo. Notice how the infrastructure for a cashless system is mostly not acceptable in most of the world.
Just to clarify, today is the preferred motion, so you're comparing two worlds. You can't talk about mechanisms, just to be clear.
So at the end of the day, I still show you where the two worlds really lie. You prefer a world where you actually have access to what happens in status quo. You don't have to be cut out from the entire world just because you don't support the government's initiative or just because you don't look in the same direction that the government does. You are not completely cut off like CG's world. But then secondly, note how at the end of the day also, in our world, you have the ability to fall back on other plans. You have the ability to solve back on other solutions, which you don't get in a world because you're completely cut off. But then secondly, you cannot have a world where it is completely the infrastructure to manage these cashless systems do not exist. One, most people don't believe in Bitcoin and other decentralized forms that are largely electronic, which means you're not going to have people engaging in trade. Production is low and other things that affect the economy are largely decreased. Secondly, internet connectivity in most parts of Africa that are in certain places are not available. Most of these communities rely on fiscal cash transfers. You can't cut them off from the entire world because they also need to survive within these local areas. We think these become the most important things within today's debate because we cannot just solve it. In the first motion, we don't have to exactly show you why, what we are doing is to show you two things. Why our world is far better and we not get the worst world which GAP presents within today's debate. We sustain the people, we ensure that they are protected, proudly opening the position.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for that wonderful speech. And the House calls upon the Deputy Prime Minister to continue government's case. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Alright, I'd like to dedicate my preemptive victory to Suleiman, my friend here, who has come to watch the debate. And I would like to begin in 3, 2, 1. Panel, don't be cheated by grammatical confetti and nice words such as lack of internet. In a modern society where nearly everyone has a smartphone and a communication device, because the fact is, there are a lot of lies that lie there, and let me solve the problem. Why exactly are we saying that we are not saying that you cannot transact? We're just saying no coins, no paper money. We are not saying no purchases. The form of expression that you're talking about still exists nonetheless, and this expression is still existing through the fact that you've actually gotten your product. How you get it, whether you swiped, whether you paid via mobile money, is the most important fact. The point is you got your product. To prove that actually online systems are more efficient than physical systems, you used to have a majority of people shopping through going to physical stores. Right now, online shopping has become the trend and the norm today. That clearly proves that with the technological advancements, regardless of where you are, even in our third world country of Kenya, we still have forms of accessing these online shops and ways to actually have this form of expression done. Anyways, our arguments are as follows. Convenience. You get to access your money from anywhere, and I think that's one thing they fail to recognize, that the importance of accessing money allows you to transact this thing with ease. If you did not have dollars, it means that you are actually going to suffer if you go to a country that operates with shillings. But imagine a world where you actually have all your currency, all your money in one system, one form. It becomes very easy. And to prove that the problem of internet can easily be solved, majority of us have shortcodes, MMIs, that actually can just be dialed, regardless of where you are. Your SIM card telecommunication provider actually made it possible, and it does not require internet. You can easily check your balance whether you're in a zone with internet or not. They avail two options: internet banking and shortcode banking. So the thing is this: they fail to recognize that the potential form of gratification that exists is larger on our side because you're able to easily access and transfer this. This is fundamentally important of consumers to express themselves. Note the expression they talk about exists in our world and cannot exist without us. Exists greater in our world as compared to theirs because we give you the access. Secondly, tracking of transactions. You realize that you can keep a track of digital currency. And this is fundamentally important for the three actors we mentioned: the state, the citizens, the financial institutions. Why is that important? Number one, the state gets a better avenue to keeping track of revenue systems or revenue collections because you're able to know how many transactions people carry out during the day. This is fundamentally important when collection of tax and things such as duties and levies that allow the state to actually generate revenue, which ensures that we better build the resources and the services of these countries. Now here's why that is important. Because of that, we can even improve our systems. Meaning that if we actually get to have access to people spending more money, access to this money, people will spend more and more, therefore we're able to collect more and more through value addition tax and other forms of taxation that actually exist. That is fundamentally important because then we're able to develop the technology. We do agree, yes, nothing is perfect, but the hackers themselves cannot be able to always keep up because they have finite resources. A state has more resources, therefore they can always invest in the best technology, the best algorithms, the best firewalls. In the event that we have more transactions, that we're able to do that. Secondly, most people omit to pay tax and do not actually adhere to the tax regulations of their countries because of the fact that we use cash. So because you're using cash, you're able to fulfill your burden as a citizen of paying taxation and empowering the state to actually give you better services. This becomes fundamentally easy, especially for the state to collect this revenue, thus making it very automated. Instead of you having to struggle to get cash and pay your system, pay for your bills, you're able to do everything from the step and the push of a button. Now here's the thing: financial institutions. Majority of people go to banks. The reason why people don't get loans and the reason why citizens suffer is because they do not have financial statements. This mostly happens especially when you transact with cash. Picture this: in a world where all transactions are cashless and actually are occurring from the mobile phone, the bank already has a track of all your transactions and know your purchasing power. Therefore, they do not need any further issues. That is fundamentally important, especially for citizens who want to gain loan and gain access to more money to start businesses and establish their finances. Keeping track of your financial record is one of the biggest reasons why most people don't get access to these types of privileges such as loans and things such as loans to enable them to start their businesses and enable them to actually further and actualize themselves. Note, we are pushing for actualization by giving you an automated system that allows you to keep track of everything. That makes it completely convenient for you, which brings us to our third completely convenient for you, which makes it easier for you actually to have these resources and move on and actualize your potential. Fourth, we believe in avoidance of forgery, and also to show that forgery is actually a problem. Majority of terrorists and majority of these money launderers and these other criminals actually use cash, meaning they actually tend to have forgery. We have forged money. You can easily forge a piece of paper in form of cash, but you can easily forge a piece of you can forge a piece of metal as coins, but you cannot forge systemic forms of cash and currency that exist only and provided only by mobile systems. Why is that the case? The systems are monitored by, number one, the financial institutions. And yes, we do agree that number two, they're easily monitored by the state. Note how cryptocurrency is failing. It is failing due to lack of regulation. In our world, we're saying that the state needs to be involved as well so that we are able to get this form of monitoring occurring. Let me take the POI.
So the problem with your case is that we don't care if the technology works. Assuming it works, it is going to stop people from being able to express themselves. Engage that.
So I think Prosper here is trying to express himself by just giving people cash. He wants to go back to his village and appear very rich because he has a bundle of notes. But that again puts him at risk because remember, it even makes it very inconveniencing and you are actually at risk of robbery and theft and attacks because you're working with physical money. Nobody can easily get your PIN and just steal money from you. Compared to that, if a thief stops you on the road and asks for your PIN, it is more difficult for him to steal from you that way as compared to him asking for money that is still in your wallet. And I think that's easier for us to protect you as the citizen. The other arguments they gave that I would like to actually touch on is the form of printing of money. We believe that they are not environmentally conscious because this means we have to cut more trees, leading to further global warming. If a cashless system will lead to us having better net zero, will be leading us to net zero, then I believe that that is more important than these adverse effects would actually have. These adverse effects are even more costly and mean we actually have to pay more money because of the mere fact that we are actually printing money. Now, what have we told you today? We've showed you the cases that we have here. We've told you that we need convenience, we need tracking, we need forgery to be avoided. But also we need efficiency, because at the end of the day, this is the most efficient system. Little resources are used. You don't have to print more money. You don't have to cater for electricity. You don't have to run a whole fleet. You're basically just using your money on the mobile phone. And remember, we've told you this is possible because it is hinged on, number one, the gold standard, which is used universally. Number two, it is used on the value, it is hinged on the value of your currency based on your economy. With that said, we believe that opening opposition needs to show us a better dramatical confetti to try and at least save a case in this debate.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for that wonderful speech. The House calls upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue House case. Yeah.
Am I audible? Okay, great. Panel, I won't let OG drag the entire opening half into a banter about whether it works or not. Debating rules, they have fiat, they can say it works, let's say it works, everything is fine, everything is amazing. Things that they can't claim on their side anyway, despite the fact that it works, is that in the world of physical cash, there's inconvenience. In their world, there's a possibility of inconvenience because you may not have internet, you may not have network, right? But secondly, what that also means is that things like money laundering can still happen. People will find a way. People can store your entire identity and use your credit card to make purchases online. People are still going to find a way. We are not saying that there can't be a system that allows people to transact, but we are saying that there's a possibility that people are still going to find a way to steal, like they were stealing in the world where people were transacting physically. So all of those things are not advantages that win this debate. They are not exclusive. These are not the issues in this debate. But secondly, the case on the environment is the wildest thing that they can ever argue. Because in status quo, a lot of states in and of themselves are anti the green movement because in this particular movement, a lot of government will have to take a haircut on a lot of unsustainable things that they do. Recognize that what that then means is that in their world, the green movement and the climate change activists are not going to get any funding because we've already demonstrated to you that these governments are draconian and do not want anyone coming after them. But then if I want to engage the banter that is going on, electronic money needs internet, network, etc. to need electricity. Majority of the electricity in the world is not from green sources. They lose from that end. We are still going to destroy the environment anyway, which is fault. Right, so let's get into important things in this debate. Freedom has been taken away from us in so many ways. We are all walking on eggshells, like as we exist. I want to kill. What that then means is that we need to defend the last line, which is the ability for us to be able to spend without fear or favor. What this then means is that in the world where these particular individuals, which is the state, because, and understand, there's a huge possibility that CG may run that will be a decentralized alternative. OG already concedes that it will be a centralized alternative. Cryptocurrencies and bitcoins are not going to be the alternative in their world. And even if Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are integrated, they will be integrated based on the way that they are regulated, meaning that the government will still have control on who gets to send transactions, etc. In El Salvador, for example, the integration of Bitcoin as a legal tender is based on a national Bitcoin wallet, which the government of El Salvador can see and can tell who is making transactions. So all they can do is say, we are tagging this wallet as a wallet of the terrorists, don't engage with this wallet, and nobody will engage with it. So basically, what you already agrees that there's going to be a centralized system. What a centralized system then means is that the government has the absolute ability to tag whatever transaction as whatever they want. Recognize the word illicit in itself currently is something that is very vague. The government can just decide to make anything illicit in status quo. But then also recognize, right? The reason why this is highly likely to happen is because in status quo, a lot of governments have shown that they do not want people to express opposition. Recognize, even in the most liberal places like Canada, the trackers started a revolution. I'm coming. doing demonstrations against the state, and the state froze their PayPal accounts. What this then means is that in most instances, all the benefits they talk about will not exist, because your ability to have economic development, the ability for you to be able to do what you want, depends on the freedoms that you have. And insofar as you don't have the freedom to spend as you wish, you are messed up and nearly cast there, right? So let's move on to other things that are important. The responses to OG's case. OG shoots themselves in this debate, because they then first of try to scale the motion by running away from what a cashless system actually looks like. A cashless system, as we've already explained, is a world where we are saying the only legitimate form of making transactions is through an electronic system developed by the central bank. The problem with this in our world, and the comparative is this: in our world, people can do both. Even if the government controls the electronic system in our world, there's an alternative for a cashless system. But what that also means is that because the government is not focusing only on the electronic system, there are then black market alternatives that are left alone for these freedom fighters to use. So when the NSAS protest happened in Nigeria and the Flutterwave accounts were frozen, Bitcoin was then used, because at that point, Nigeria doesn't largely have any proper stop snapping. Nigeria doesn't have any proper regulations on electronic money, because that is not their focal point. So what that then means is that you are able to use these black market alternatives because it is not being watched by the government like your hawk. But in your world where this is what happens, all of these black market alternatives will then be folded into the government system, because the government recognizes that if they don't do that, they are fucked. So in the United States of America, if you want to use Bitcoin or have a Bitcoin exchange, you need to go to the state and ask for a Bitcoin license. That is how it works. So at the end of the day, you screw everyone up, because now alternatives do not exist, and the fringes that these people use as a way to maneuver don't exist anymore. Ayafa, I'll take a PY from you. Please be honest about your extension publicity.
Right. Do you think that in digital world probably have more educated people?
I think this debate, right, happens regardless of whether the people are educated, poor or rich. The conversation is really simple. Whether you are educated or not, if the state doesn't want certain activities to happen, they have every right in this particular debate to stop you from doing that. But also recognize that the ability for self-defense for the poor, the downtrodden in society, is based on the ability for them to have capacity. For example, buying of arms, etc. In a world where the government can easily flag all of these accounts and say, we are not going to allow you to do all of these transactions, all of these people don't have the self-defense mechanism that exists. What that then means is that in instances where you end up in a draconian cycle, this draconian cycle becomes endless, and this is what the world order looks like. But recognize, this then begins to cause people to have a particular manner of living or manner of doing things, because you are scared of doing things that would cause the state or other actors from labeling you as a threat to the state or labeling you as an individual who should not be transacted with. It is exactly the same as social credit scores, basically, but this time they are using real money. What that then means is that things like citizen journalism that fights things like corruption, things like citizen journalism that allows us to uncover the rot in society becomes inherently prohibited, because you don't want to do anything that causes the government to say you have $1 million and we're freezing you. Look at the owner of Alibaba from China. He vanished for a couple of months. He came back and he stopped saying that the Chinese government is not doing a good job. That is how it's going to work. What the entire government bench and opening opposition with this debate has to explain is why whatever development, whatever economic benefits they bring is far more important than the most basic thing in life, which is the ability for you to live a life of your own, where you are not walking on eggshells because the state is capable of messing you up. It's been an amazing day to oppose. Opening opposition wins the debate.
Okay, thanks, Speaker, for that wonderful speech, and that marks the end of the opening half of this debate. The House calls upon the Member of Government to start closing government's case. Yeah.
Can I pick the mic? I can't pick the mic. Okay. Well, you guys can all hear me. I'm just wrong. Sorry, guys. So, just put your hands up, say POI for you, POI. I will hear you, but I might not respond. I'll just do the hand thing. So, is everyone ready? So, in 3, 2, 1. So, I'm going to start with like a bit of clarity and a response to opening opposition. Opening opposition does not realize how non-comparative and non-argumentative today's debate is. At the point in time where you say that despots exist,
and despots use brutal methods like seizing bank accounts to take control. The same despotic China that you think can inevitably do bad things to Jack Ma, who is a billionaire, can also just as easily go to Hong Kong and use guns as an alternative. At the point in time where the competent alternative, where you cannot bank, where you cannot just simply lock people out of the economy, is killing them. We think in our world, the comparative is that we save their lives by giving despots a more confident alternative. We are already preserving the lives of people, of regular people. We think we flip that impact. But the more realistic truth that we need to understand here is simple. Is that at the point in time where you claim that there are countries like Canada that do these things in a very shady way, but they don't like to, but they like to seem nice and seem like they are human rights advocates, right? Canada, America, sorry about that. The problem here is this, right? Is that when you create alternative systems, there is less drive to implement foolproof, very transparent systems. Because the reason why there is policy that allows banking sectors to freeze accounts or inevitably freeze accounts remotely with regards to crypto is because there is not enough pressure there, and most people believe that they can find alternatives. When people in democratic countries realize that the government can wake up one day and say we no longer have the right to bank a system, they are going to do two things. One, either aggressively vote out that government, or second of all, and more realistically, create, due to capitalist incentive, and understand that capitalist incentives still exist, have tech bros that inevitably innovate more transparent systems sit down. That inevitably innovate more transparent systems. Understand that decentralized banking already exists. At the point in time where those incentives exist, you are probably more likely to create a more transparent system, a system that doesn't even need to create black markets or backlogs to be transparent, and still function well and create the change that you need. What's your PY?
Point is, the money that will be spent is controlled by the central bank. Whether you create an app or not, it is still going to use the rails and the technology of the central bank.
And as I said, in a democracy, you will inevitably, when you know that the central bank can cripple your accounts from the touch of a button, implement systems that limit how the central bank can do that, because you are a democratic state. And in despotic states, the alternative to crippling people's bank accounts is killing them. So creating that system actually kind of saves lives, which is good. Simple logic. But we move on. The next thing that we're going to do here in today's debate is show how we create a better world for poor people. And understand why poor people matter in today's debate, right? You understand that poor people are usually the most marginalized members of society, right? Because you need to understand that poverty itself is an assault on fundamental dignity. Because when you consider human rights, like the right to life, the right to own property, the right to live a decent living, they are all contingent on access to money and access to a functional society in itself, right? So at the point in time where there are no systemic structures existing in status quo because of how bad the capitalist system is, for poor people to move up the ladder, they are stuck in a system where they are consistently having their dignity stripped from them. Now, when I want to play a small mind game, right? And I think this is where I'm going to identify the biggest problem for people now. They have failed to construct a realistic view of what a world with cashless society looks like. A world with cashless society and fairly responsible government and capitalist systems does something. That they realize that when you go cashless, you have a tendency to eliminate or alienate poor people. When you realize that that tendency exists, you choose to cover it up. 4 incentives to create that change. One is that if you are a government, especially because poor people tend to congregate within certain countries, so like India, Nigeria have millions of poor people that count as a large voting demographic, you have an incentive to implement policies that favor them and allow them to not be kicked out of the system. Second of all, as a government, you also don't want your position to use this against you and screw you over. You also don't want to have heightened crime rates because people are kicked out of the system. So you have an incentive to include them. On the capitalist end, right, is that you have an access, you have a potential market of people with money. Because even if every poor person in the world has just barely $100, $100 from a million people is $100 million market. So that in itself is valuable and very relevant. Something that needs to be engaged and something that needs to be genuinely considered in a realistic sense. What that means that there's capitalist incentive, there's market incentive. How does this play out? We think one, it already happens in Africa in status quo, that there are significant incentives to give people access to technology and access to utensils simply because of their market potential. So in the status quo, MTN in certain countries literally gives people devices for free and tells them that we'll take a percentage of every time you use credit on our device as a payback for technology we've given you up until you pay up. Just simply because they know the value of giving people access and opening up a market for themselves that's potentially very big. In the status quo, governments also do this because when the COVID vaccines and COVID problem came up, countries started giving people technology for free just so that kids will be able to attend online classes and inevitably improve and better themselves because they understand
understand the problems that exist there and how this can be a voting issue. Your extension.
The problem with having no cash is that there's nothing that government to peg their currencies to. How would inflation be worked on in the world?
So the thing is, the thing is this here, the cash doesn't stop existing simply because the price is not there. Most companies are already largely online. You just have cash for smaller transactions and they can still peg their currencies. We don't think this stops being a problem. I'm not going to trade by barter and move it to a system without physical plastic down. So back to what I was saying, right? And I think this is the realistic solution to this debate and why we win, right? Is that at the point in time when you give people access to technology, access to the internet, access to the broader world, one, they're able to educate themselves a lot easier. Second of all, they're able to access new markets and inevitably apply whatever minimal skills they're able to learn and get to actually open up a global labor market that already exists. Why we have tons of remote workers in Africa, some of them who are very well educated who have gotten access. What this means is this, right? We empower poor people in a cashless world because of the demand to inevitably create or give them access to digital societies, to inevitably make them wealthier, improve their lives, and create a significant chance of bettering them. At the point in time when we concede that poor people matter, that poverty is an assault on dignity, and people's lives are significantly much worse by virtue of the lack of money that they have, there is a significant need to ensure that their world is better off. At the point in time when we create a world that allows these things to happen by creating access, we think that we grossly outweigh everything in today's debate. We have the largest impacts, and logically we should win. Primarily, the rebuttal just to remind you guys. We explained how one in despotic nations is non-comparative. But if there was to be a comparative, it would be better on our side, because if they can't control your accounts, they will just simply shoot you in the head. We think we save lives. The second thing is that in democratic worlds, we create a much more accountable society, because people then begin to talk about these things when they happen and they implement the changes, and there are structures of change that happen. We are very proud to win this debate from psychology government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Speaker, for that wonderful speech. And the House calls upon the member of opposition to begin closing opposition's case. Here.
Starting 3. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Contrary to popular belief, I don't have a lot to say. I only have 3 things to say. Number 1, what's the problem with opening government in these debates? The premise of their case is false, and that's the reason why all of their extensions fall down. They argue on things like mobile money, etc. This is not a cashless society. It's a society that system is paid with currency. That is to say, until you have money to put in your mobile money, you cannot be cashless. The real case to be defended by Paudc was a world without cash, a total non-cashless thing. If Paudc's premise and frame for their case is false, I find no reason why the adjudication panel can buy any of the extensions or any of the impacts. They never defended that well. The problem with OO is this. 1, they really have no extension. They only have rebuttals. What is very true? When they say things like money is a form of expression, having a cashless system is also a form of expression. You can always buy things with your e-cash. You can always buy things with your cryptocurrency. If you want to support George Floyd, you can always send things to George Floyd. If you want to buy perfume in the market, you can always buy. Whichever form of expression it is, as long as it is a legal tender that is acceptable by people, that case by OO falls down. It's a shame CG and OG couldn't see that. That's not the case. The second problem with OO is to talk about things like the second problem with them is to talk about things that this house prefer motions does not do, and that's a basic contradiction in their case that the panels must note. First thing, when the first speaker comes, first speaker says the things like infrastructure, etc., will not be hard. On Gulf side, things like what's the name? People may not be into it. Things like everyone may not prefer that, the people who not use it. This house prefers motion. The world restarts. Everything. Please, can you have quiet over here? Good. This house restarts. This is what the madam says. The world restarts. Everything that cash society was built on was what people naturally aggregated to in their world. I mean, you're making their case better. When the world goes cashless, everything in society.
I've paused your time, Speaker. Friends, you had your time to speak. Please let him speak. You can not be allowed to have conversations amongst yourself. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. I'll be continuing in 3, 2, 1. That is to say, everything, whether you are literate or illiterate in the new world, whether network can be there, etc., are things that they should have for these things to work, which means that cannot be the case they bring. And this house prefers mostly the world starts afresh. That's the only thing that people know. That is the only thing, no other alternatives. The problem with closing government becomes this. Closing government says, on their side, how they rebut the good case that OO brings. Because I can't say like OO was very credible cases, that I'll tell you. On their side, they say, people can always sidestep government things, because from Paudc, they agree, and OO also agrees, that this thing has to be centralized for it to work. The brilliant thing from cities to say is people can create their own apps and go around this. The thing is this, government controls it. People must accept something to be a legal tender for you to accept. Everyone can create their own apps. No one can use that. Government still has overarching control. Their second case on making the poor better is just a generic thing. That's not the case. This is the case from closing opposition, and this is why we on very simple grounds. One, it's analytical extension and more impacts to OO's case. I'll be very honest with that. See where the point goes. One, what do we say on our side? When there's a centralized point to control things, they say governments have overarching power to stop you and freeze your account. That is not the main reason why these things go bad. The main reason why we do not have all forms of exchange pegged to one thing or centralized form is because when there's a shock wave, when something affects one system, it affects everyone. The reason why people should have cash, etc. in their pockets, the reason why there should be so much currencies, etc. is because when something strikes these things, when hackers hack these things, it doesn't affect the whole chain of everybody that uses this. The agency of money to a person's life is so inalienable and so immutable that anything that affects one person and sends a shockwave through everything that happens is so bad you can't take. See, even if you are comparing our case to theirs, there's talk about specific locations where when people behave bad, they only attack you. Ours is far-reaching. Ours talks about everybody that is in that centralized system that has no sort of a buffer or a shock attaching thing where you can use your own things to sponsor that. That is why we want things like the diversification where people can have these things. Why we do not want a centralized thing. That is why we bring on a very simple note. The second thing to talk about, and very important, that was directly by the dismissive POI thing that he responded to, was on inflation. Why do countries have cash no matter what happens? And even in countries that are very advanced, they have this. You don't realize, one, the issue with creating money is that on our side, there are natural takers of inflation. What stops the government from giving out so much money, for doling out so much cash, for issues of their own corruption, of getting so much money? The problem becomes this: when I am in control of printing money, the things that stop me naturally now is because there are limited resources. You need to have money to go and buy the things that you can use to create money. I do not have all the time to be creating the amount of money that I can do. The third we talk about things like electricity. You engage so much cost. Why is it very important? On their side, that side, it becomes so easy for governments to prop in money to use. What is this to say? With a tap of a button, they can add $100 billion to a country's economy. Why is this very bad? The issue of inflation is the reason why most countries are bad. The issue of inflation is why most economies are crippled. These are things that are dead to basic agency. Like, see, this debate is not a very hard debate. It's a very simple one. For issues of controlling inflation and stopping governments from being the most naturally incentivized things that they would want to do is the reason why we always peg these things to things that will constrain government from printing so much money, inflation, and its impact and things that we say pure.
Now, is the speaker aware that because of a centralized system, you can easily monitor all the governments because of the level of influence?
Good. Why can't governments always have propaganda? Why can't governments have an incentive to co-opt with each other? You don't provide the counterfactual also doesn't happen on your side. You can't always see a negative one and not defend your side. That is not a checking mechanism. You can see, every government has their own. Isn't that what you say? The government is in control. I'm printing my own thing like, who the heck takes me like better POS next time? This is the reason why on their side anonymity is bad. It's two things. It's either this new world. They don't defend whether it's the fully tracked world or world where it is anonymous. The world where it is very anonymous is a world where people don't show their faces. Money laundering, things like terrorists, people who steal money have much more incentives to use cryptocurrency where they cannot be tracked. These things are things governments cannot have a hand on and know this is the face behind this money. Because in that world, there is that opportunity where people can totally use it without being anonymous. That's what using cryptocurrency and things give the advantage of. The second thing to say about that is when
governments can fully track, because that's why they say government to stop you from using, like that's the hugest impact you get from them. This is why it's very bad on our side, quite on that ground. One thing is to talk about the reason why people would always have, one thing is to talk about the reason why people's identity and their own information would be used. They only talk about freezing your account. They would profile you, how much money you use, targeted ads and fake capitalism. They can breach data, use all these things, because everything your life depends upon is populated at this force. When the attack comes, it's not only about the amount of money that is constraining your account, it's about the very life you live, how you spend your money, and things you use it on. That is even when it is being tracked. At the end of the day, panel, let us reduce inflation. Don't give government to do things they can run away with. Let people keep their own privacy. The debate is simple, slow simplifies it. You win. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Speaker, for that wonderful speech. Just a reminder to keep time. The speech was 7 minutes, 30 seconds long, and you will discredit the... Cool. And then also secondly, kindly, please don't make no friends, because when the other speaker is speaking, you're terribly interrupting them, and you're also interrupting us as judges as well, and that's really unfair for them. With that said, the House calls upon the government will to conclude the case for government inspection. Yeah.
Panel, I think there's a quota into this debate. That quota seeks to picture the most vulnerable actors that exist as far as this debate is concerned. Because what these guys try to do is just to make the debate look like an advantage and disadvantage sort of debate. Why this is problematic is that we're going to run an advantage and disadvantage sort of debate until night falls, and then nobody's going to win. Because the biggest case you get from OCC, we lose our voice when you allow this to happen, because people are unable to speak because they can't actually spend money freely. They give crazy analysis like the NSAS program. We agree to this, but on our side of the house, there's a counterfactual that actually responds to this case, because we think that even in a cashless society, is a world where people are able to spend recklessly in sponsoring things like terrorism, and they do not necessarily need to account for them. So on one side, when you can't spend freely to stop something as good as your voice being heard, on that side, you actually get the world where people spend on terrorism. So what this means is that there's a bigger actor that actually exists in today's debate that we necessarily need to engage, right? So our matter. Our engagement to this debate, which is something IAFA gives you, creates a lot of impact analysis, and that's how we think today's debate ought to run, right? We think that the debate sit down. We think that the debate exists, in a space where we do not just actually engage the disadvantage and advantage that actually exists. But why is this important? Notice that this is exclusive to CG. IAFA brings a proper sophistication that this debate actually needs, right? When he points out how cashless world increases the tendency for government to be more welfareist, right? As beautiful as this looks, right, there's a lot of impact that this actually creates, because the existence of no other option. Finally, notice that there's no other option, which means that there's no fallback plan where government needs to say, okay, they are reluctant because they are less coerced into doing what actually society actually needs, right? Let's picture a world where we say, okay, Kenya becomes fully, cashless, right? It's a world where you necessarily need to educate people, right? And a world where you need to provide the necessary things that you need for these guys to go cashless. But these guys just argue blindly and they say, oh, we do not have these things, hence we can't actually even go cashless in the first instance, right? Because the reason why people will take long queues to do things like crazy as BVN in Nigeria is because there's no other option. Because prior to that, government allowed people to own bank accounts without BVN in Nigeria, right? But because this actually was a rule, there's a need for them to, because there's no option for them to actually create a system that actually puts in place BVN to be very, very, very more important. But even at the worst, when we think government will not do this, right? We think private firms will actually are still incentivized to actually come into that space and do these things, right? We think private actors are more incentivized to come in and do this. And these guys are consistently in competition, in status quo, right? This situation is unique to the idea that private actors always want to give more appealing operational systems that could give a large extent to what appeal to people, because now there's a larger space for people to want to because there's no longer cash. They need more people to buy into their own system. So it's more likely to be appealing to these guys. And how do they create these systems to be appealing to these guys? That's a response to something IAFA tells you. Listen, these guys create systems that are less likely going to be controlled by government. This is something IAFA gives you. The response to this was very, very, very lame, and these guys just say people will pump in so much money and then create inflation. But now notice how morally bankrupt that idea is. Don't think today's debate is a child's play. Right? Two responses to this. The absence of alternative choices creates establishments that extend, like government extend for government, reduces the level to which government will extend those sort of control. Let's jump to CIGO. COS, response to COS is very easy. You do not need to peg a currency for it to be stable. That's crazy, right? Because this is pure economics, right? Balance of payments will always be out on grounds of exchanges and all of those kind of things. This is pure demand and supply, right? The reason why euro to dollar is not pegged for it to be stable is because it's pure balance of payment. Like it's just an exchange of demand and supply. This is pure economics. It's very, very easy to understand. Second response, right? If government has overtracking power, right? There are three transformation mechanisms that actually takes out the claims that these guys give you. First, we think that this is a democratic system. There's a reason why Alpha mentions that. Secondly, we think that this democratic system will exist in a space of no alternative. That means this government, they agree that this government will now be accountable. But then they say that, in the space of that accountability within that democratic system, how then will government be so reckless that they actually carry out overwhelming power when we can actually demand certain things from them? Because this government are accountable in a democratic system. At worst, we're going to vote out this government. We don't care what you actually want to say.
Right. So in status quo, we all need to live for society to go on. That then means that the government has to invest very well in healthcare. But healthcare is shit. In the privatization, poor people will be cut out because the cost then becomes expensive. Because of capitalism, you lose the debate.
See, this is a very crazy thing to say after the level of sophistication we give you in the first 2 minutes of our speech. He said, poor people it becomes more problematic for these guys. What these guys is dragging me to argue is pure benefits or their economic benefits of that. One response I could give you is that, see, if governments if you tell you prioritize the poorest people in status quo, this is something different from what you said we prioritize the citizens, we tell you prioritize the poorest people in status quo. The direct response to this is what they want us to do. The economic grounds of this, right? Because we think this debate is also economics, but we think that actual analysis is very important. But what they want us to engage is just a world where, do you know how much third world countries or countries like Nigeria, Kenya are spending actually creating money. So let's examine the idea that all these guys don't necessarily need to create cash, right? We think that money is actually put into other things, and then that's the sort of response you want to get. The idea of capitalism doesn't work into this debate, engagement in this debate. The next point they give you, inflation will be controlled, through a lot of inflation is a problem in today's debate. We think inflation will be controlled through a lot of means, right? Things like let me just take this into economics, right? Inflation will be controlled through a lot of means, right? Inflation will be controlled through increase in taxes, right? Because you think like increase in taxes actually is direct to how inflation is controlled. One is that when you have less money to spend, right, it means that you have less disposable income. So if you increase taxes, right, people are less, having money to spend. But it's not even a cash problem, right? It's a monetary system. We think that the simple economics show that, cash or no cash, money created will always reflect the value of that particular economy. That's why they measure things like GDP and all of that. It's a fallacy for these guys to just say, government without money or government without cash, we just pump in billions into the economy without no restrictions, right? That's a lie from the people wherever they got that analysis from. Pure economic states that, see, the level at which you're going to export or pump money into the system is as a result of the value that you have. Those values will be weighed by levels of export and import, right? Those are transactions that will actually speak in levels of wealth. Because no country actually before. Just imagine that countries cannot just pumping money into the system by cash, right? That means, of course, the only reason why we're going to say, we don't have money in the system, maybe we can't print money. The last thing they tell you is that, see, we don't have a system where this thing is tracked, right? But notice that all their argument exists in a world where there's an alternative. That is where today's debate is. There is no alternative. We will engage in a world where government do not have a fallback, and they necessarily need to engage a system where they must make this thing work for them to actually even be an accountable government in the first instance. How do you even work without tracking when there's no alternative?
Alright, speaking after one of the speech, just to remind Jeeves, please don't talk when the speaker is speaking. We're about to quote the immortal words of Camp, Elisha and Ayafa, do you guys want to debate from outside? Anyways, the House now calls upon the Chief Whip to conclude this debate. Yeah.
2, 3, 2, 1. So the panel, the reason why it took long to come here is because I really don't get the engagement to our case. Because they say this, that is morally abhorrent. I don't know if that is really an engagement. Our case is morally abhorrent. I really don't know if that is what we were taught as novices, really. But also, the funny thing about speakers who say that the debate is not about advantages versus disadvantages is that they usually fall into the same trap of debating advantages of their world as against the disadvantages of their world. That's really debate with a spice of rhetoric. I really don't know why it sounds early to say that the debate is not really about advantages versus advantages. From zero, we do not prefer a world which leaves people more vulnerable to shocks at the upstream of the economic or financial system. Why do you win today's debate? Because I have to show the fault of the different things. First, always frame is very tricky, and I feel like they make the debate a little bit, why? Because they are debating a cash-light society, not really a cashless society. Because when they talk about things like online shopping, when they talk about things like mobile money, those things are still pegged to physical currency. And the reason why the mobile money vendor would take a certain transaction because he believes that there's a certain physical cash that has been transferred to his other side. Very similarly, the reason why you are able to engage in the mobile money transaction is because you first put in physical cash in that regard. But secondly, online shopping, the shop believes that the physical cash has gone to be in their bank account, and that's why they are trading it in that regard. And that's the whole line in which their whole arguments are premised on, so convenience and all those stuff. That means that the alternative that OO preaches, which we also buy into, is something that works in our world, where we can achieve convenience without necessarily having a cashless society. So we can have people using mobile money, we can have people using online shopping, where their physical cash is in the bank. We achieve all the benefit that they then get in that regard. But also, the word that they have to defend is a word of e-cash. That's like ECD, e-Naira. I don't know if Kenya has the e-shilling yet, but that's what the progression does. E-cash means that there is no printing of cash. There are no cash in banks. I don't even think there will even be any for banks. It means that it's just like tickets that are on your phones or something. That's the word that the industry has to defend. Because their frame is tricky, their premise is tricky, I really don't know how to engage them, and I think they make the debate messy in that regard. Next thing about OO and why repeat our opening. Because OO's majority of their case, and especially attacks to negative case, is based on possibility. Oh, there can be hackers. Oh, there can be this. They don't really show that there will be. I think my partner does a lot more of plausibility analysis. When he tells you that, yes, there will be hackers, but the reason why they will have an incentive to hack is because there's a constant need of them to rob. When you have blocked them from robbing physically, they will have to upgrade. They will go into the world of electronics and be able to hack electronically and all those stuff. They say they can hack, they will be hacking. We show why there's still an incentive to hack. So plausibility versus plausibility, we win on the bench as well. But also, CG, I really don't know CG's case because I don't know if the panel also similarly has their case, because their case is that they save more lives. Now, despotic states will not be killing people physically, they'll be crippling them financially. I really don't know, I don't think we can go into the mind of Xi Jinping. If he really wants to kill you, he'll kill you regardless. He will cripple you financially, also kill you in addition. I think there's a double jeopardy even in their world in that regard. Now, what is our case in today's debate? And it's very simple. First, vulnerability of the whole financial system. First, we told you that in your world, you create a kind of super interconnectedness, where because of that, when there's a shock to one part of the economic system, it trickles down and affects the whole economic system, leaving the poor people that they really care about much more vulnerable. What does this look like? And this feeds into the hacking analysis. In our world, when the central bank is bent, when the central bank is something is messed up with, people can still have their cash and they still invest those sums. In their world, when there's a hack of the whole central bank system and the money that we use are e-cash, digital cash and all that, it means that it can trickle down, it means that it's likely to affect everybody. It may mean erasure of information. People who have worked hard to accumulate large amounts of money can lose their money in a wave because one hacker hacked the whole data of the financial system of the central bank in that regard. The world leaves people more vulnerable. The second thing we talk about is on stability. They say that you do not need to peg currencies. I think the answer is simple. Ask cryptocurrency. because they do not need to pay currencies. Today, it can be here. Tomorrow, money can become worthless in that regard. In a world where there is a physical cash and a peg to minerals like gold and all those stuff, it means that we can gauge always the value of money, and because of that, there is no huge swings in that regard. That stability is very important in the financial market, where people trade on things like credibility and predictability, as well as stability in that regard, and people would like to invest in countries based on stability. But secondly, the next thing that we say is on how their world creates too much power for government. Realize how this is different from O, because O owes too much power analysis. There's respect to things like funding, there's respect to things like freedom of expression and all those stuff. I really don't see the tangibility of it. I think people can still fund protests through cryptocurrency and all those stuff. But our problem, our own is very simple. One, we extend it to agency, to privacy, to your very being. That because of the e-cash, your details being there, because of that, the government is able to track your every financial transaction and know your details. They can sell those, they can sell this and all those stuff, especially when you think that most governments are malignant in that regard. Our case is much more impactful than them in that regard. Before I'll tell you.
Now, pegging currency is done only not on cash, it's done on the gold standard.
Yeah.
Now, saying that you recognize that cryptocurrency nature is based on the fact that it has no value base.
Yeah, simple. So in our world, there's existence of physical cash, even though there's cashless, physical cash. So in your world, it's not pegged to gold. It is just some numbers that get being released by the central bank in that regard. So it even fits into a case. Next time my partner tells you some inflation, the response is simple: taxes. But the kind of inflation analysis we do is not fiscal policy, i.e. taxes. We do monetary policy inflation. There are two types of economic policy. That's fiscal policy and monetary policy. His response is targeted at fiscal policy caused inflation, i.e. taxes. What our case was really monetary policy caused inflation, i.e. getting a lot of money into the system. So you really see that they don't engage our case, and that's why I was very late in coming here, because I really didn't get their engagement in that regard. But also, I think the way into this debate is very simple. There are likely harms on both sides, we agree. But in which world, and that makes the debate very slim, that's the best weighing metric, is one where those harms can easily be reversed, or one that those harms can easily be checked. In a world where there's a fiscal cash and there's less interconnectedness, if one person is fucked up in terms of banks, money and all those stuff, it doesn't affect me. In a world where it's too connected at the top, when the attack happens to the top, it trickles down and affects everybody. In our world, those things can be reversed or checked, blocked. In our world, it's less likely to be so. We win in that regard. Thank you.
Here, thanks, speaker, for that wonderful speech. It's too practical.
All right, thank you, speaker, for that wonderful speech. Just reminder to everyone, please move close, shake hands, and evacuate the area. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Good luck. Yeah, right.